Hello and welcome. My name is Bex and I'm the hands behind Daisy and Dime, and today I'll be walking you through my newest crochet pattern, the Atticus Slipover. Atticus is a super customizable design that's great for the colder months. You can wear it on its own or layer it over shirts and dresses. In today's walkthrough, I'll be making a tighter, cropped version with a mock neck, but it looks awesome as an oversized turtleneck vest too. Please note, this is just a quick walkthrough to show the construction method and isn't intended to be a full tutorial, but you can find the full detailed measure yourself style crochet pattern available on my Etsy shop. Without any further ado, let's get into it. To make this top, you can use just about any yarn that you would like. Today I'm using Sugarbush Yarn's Bliss, which is a discontinued yarn, but it's a DK weight wool blend. We're going to be starting by making the collar. Begin by making a chain that's an odd number. Your starting chain is going to determine the height of the collar, so if you want a folded turtleneck, make sure to make it double the length. Today I'm just making a mock neck, so it's not going to be folded, so I'm just making it about 2 to 3 inches wide. After making your foundation chain, we're going to work in the Eli rib stitch as instructed in the pattern until we crochet a strip that's long enough to wrap comfortably but snugly around our head. Once you have your long strip worked, we're going to join it to make a tube. Fold it in half with the front post stitches facing away from each other, line up the ends, and then slip stitch through both layers of fabric to join. If you're making a folded turtleneck collar, you want to make sure that the front post stitches are facing towards you so that when it's folded, the right side of the ribbing is on the outside of the garment. Since my collar is a mock neck, I'm just going to turn it right side out right now. Now we can go ahead and finish the collar by working a round of single crochet all along the edge. Since we're working along the side edge of our tube, just place 2 single crochets into each double crochet post to make sure they're spaced evenly throughout this round. After slip stitching into our first single crochet made, our collar is complete and we're ready to start on our short rows. Atticus has us working partial rows to help raise the back panel to be higher than the front. To start, we need to section off the back panel. Count 5 stitches backwards from your working loop and place a stitch marker in the 6th stitch. Now, follow the pattern's instructions to determine your back panel stitch count and count this number from your first stitch marker. Once you've finished your stitch count, place a second, different looking stitch marker into the next stitch. We're going to be starting our short rows now, so to do this, follow the pattern by chaining 2, then cinnamon roll stitch across like the pattern instructs until you're 5 stitches away from stitch marker 2. Slip stitch into the next 2 stitches so that you now only have 3 stitches before your stitch marker, then turn your work, leaving the rest of the stitches unworked. Now what we're going to do is just repeat the cinnamon roll stitch process all the way across. We've added 2 stitches to our stitch count thanks to those 2 slip stitches from the previous row. We're just going to keep working that cinnamon roll stitch all the way across until we reach the end of our first row. Once you've reached the end of your row, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did on the first short row. So we're just going to slip stitch into those next 2 stitches of the collar round. This is going to add 2 stitches to our stitch count. And then all we have to do is chain 2 and then cinnamon roll stitch all the way across just like before. So every row is going to be the exact same for these short rows. We're going to cinnamon roll stitch all the way across. Then once we get to the end of our row, we're going to slip stitch into the next 2 collar stitches. You're going to be working in this manner for 4 rows in total, and then on our 5th and 6th rows, we're going to change it up. So here we're at the end of our 5th row, and we're just going to finish completing our cinnamon roll stitches until we're at the very end. And then what we're going to do is slip stitch into the next collar stitch. And then we're going to slip stitch into that marked stitch. So this is stitch marker 2. And now we are just going to turn our work and we're going to complete row 6 of our short rows. So we're just chaining 2, cinnamon roll stitching all the way across, just like we've done for the rest of the rows. And now once we get to the end, we're going to slip stitch into the next collar stitch, and then we're going to double crochet into that final marked stitch in stitch marker 1. And with that, our short rows are complete. We've done our short row shaping, and it looks a little bit funny right now, but as we do our shoulder shaping rows, the collar is going to get brought down so the back is higher than the front. We're going to be shaping the shoulders next. Since Atticus is worked top down, we'll be working in rounds along the collar, placing increases at 2 points to widen our top. First, we need to move our stitch markers into our current row so that we know where to place our increases, so do that if you haven't already. To start the round, we're going to chain 2, then place 2 double crochets into the same stitch. This starts the increase at stitch marker 1, which will finish off at the end of the round. Next, starting with a slip stitch, we'll cinnamon roll stitch all the way across our work until we reach stitch marker 2. You should be ending on a slip stitch before getting to your second stitch marker. Once we've reached our second stitch marker, we're going to make an increase by working 5 double crochets into the marked stitch. After this increase is completed, we'll move the stitch marker into the third double crochet of our increase. Then continue working in cinnamon roll stitch across the rest of the collar, again starting with a slip stitch until we reach the end of our round. Once you've worked your last stitch of the round, place 2 double crochets into the first stitch of the round, right beside where we made the chain 2 in the beginning. Remember, we started our round with a chain 2 and then 2 double crochets into the same spot as stitch marker 1. So this created the beginning of our increase, and now at the end of the round, we're going to complete our 5 double crochet increase by adding those 2 last double crochets into the end of the round. Now you just have to slip stitch into the top of the chain 2 that you made at the beginning of the round to complete everything. Move your stitch marker into the top of the chain 2 that you made at the beginning of this round so that you know where to place your increase for the next. We've just completed one round of shoulder increases. Each of these rounds is the exact same, but I'll show you again how to do it. So once again, we are starting our round with a chain 2. Remember that this counts as a double crochet. And we're going to place 2 double crochets into the same spot that stitch marker 1 is in. This counts as the beginning of our increase at stitch marker 1. Now we can get right back into the cinnamon roll stitch, so all we have to do is start with a slip stitch, then back loop double crochet into the next stitch. And we're going to keep doing this until we reach our next stitch marker, so stitch marker 2. And again, you should be ending on a slip stitch if your stitch count is correct. Now that we've reached stitch marker 2, we can go ahead and make our second shoulder increase, which again is just 5 double crochets into that marked stitch. Move your stitch marker into the third double crochet of our shoulder increase that we just made. And just proceed with the cinnamon roll stitch just like you have before until you reach the end of your round. So now that we're at the end of our round, we're going to finish off our increase at stitch marker 1 by placing 2 double crochets into our marked stitch. And now we're just going to complete our round by slip stitching into the top of the chain 2 that we made at the start of the round. With the end of this round, that also signifies the completion of our increase that corresponds with stitch marker 1. And speaking of stitch marker 1, we're going to just place that into the top of the chain 2 that we made at the start of the round so that everything stays nice and aligned with our shoulder increases. A quick tip: every single one of your increases should always be occurring in the center from the increase before it. So it'll always be occurring on the 3rd double crochet or the center double crochet of that 5 double crochet cluster. Also, don't forget you're turning your work after every single round. This is very important with the cinnamon roll stitch. Keep working shoulder increases until your piece measures your half bust circumference all the way across. So once it's the right size, we can go ahead with splitting off the front and the back sections. So to do that, I am just going to be chaining 2. Remember, this counts as a double crochet. And instead of placing our shoulder increases, I'm just going to go straight into the cinnamon roll stitch, right into the next stitch. I'm going to continue cinnamon roll stitching all the way across until I reach my next stitch marker. And I'm just going to place 1 double crochet into my marked stitch. Then I'm just going to turn my work, leaving the remainder of the stitches left unworked. So I'm just going to be working on this section now, and I'm just going to chain 2 and cinnamon roll stitch all the way across, just along this back panel between the 2 stitch markers that we have. You're going to keep working rows of cinnamon roll stitch until your piece is as long as you want your armhole depth to be. The pattern also includes instructions for how to shape the armhole slightly so it has a nice curve to it. Once you've achieved your desired measurements, you can go ahead and fasten off your work. And now we can reattach our yarn to stitch marker 2, and we're going to do the exact same thing but on the opposite side so we can create the front panel now. So we're just going to start by chaining 2. Remember, this counts as a double crochet. And now we can go ahead and start our cinnamon roll stitch. And we'll work that all the way until we reach our next stitch marker, at which point we're just going to place a double crochet into that marked stitch, just like we did on the back panel. And now we can just go ahead and work the same number of rows on our front panel that we did for our back panel. Now we're going to be working our joining row, so we're going to be joining the front and the back panels together. So what we're going to do is start off our row just like we normally do. So we're going to chain 2 and then go straight into the cinnamon roll stitch all the way across until we reach the other side. And once you've reached the end of your front panel, we're going to be joining it to the back by just chaining 3 and then double crocheting into the first stitch of the back panel. Now you can go ahead and continue with your cinnamon roll stitch all the way across the back panel until you've reached the end of that panel as well. When you reach the end of your back panel, we're just going to go ahead and join it to our front panel just like we did previously. So all we have to do is chain 3. And then what we're going to do, because we're joining everything together so it's one big round, is we're just going to slip stitch into the top of the chain 2 that we made at the beginning of this step. So we've joined together the front and back panels, and now we can just keep working rounds of cinnamon roll stitch until our slipover is our desired length. Once you are happy with the length of your slipover, we can finally work on the last part of the pattern, which is the join as you go ribbing along the bottom of the slipover. I recommend sizing your hook down for this section just so that the ribbing is a little bit more dense. It also helps to cinch in the slipover a little bit. So we're going to be working along the side of our work. And to do this, we're going to first make a foundation chain, which is the length that we want our ribbing to be. I'm making mine the same length as my mock neck collar ribbing, but you can make yours as short or as long as you like, depending on your preference. Once you have the desired length of your foundation chain, you're just going to chain 2. And then we're going to double crochet into the 3rd chain from our hook. And we're going to just keep double crocheting in each chain all the way across until we've reached the end. When you've reached the end of your foundation chain, we need to join it to our main body. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next stitch in our main body, and we're going to just slip stitch into the following stitch. And then we need to raise our work up so that we can continue to the next row. So we'll slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. And then to proceed with our next row, we're going to ignore those 3 slip stitches that we made at the end of the last row. And we're just going to double crochet into the next stitch of our ribbing. And then we'll alternate between front post double crochets and regular double crochets all the way across. This is the exact same process as our Eli rib stitch that we used at the very beginning of this tutorial to make the neckline. For our next row, we're just going to chain 2. This counts as a double crochet. So in the next stitch, to work our Eli rib stitch, we're just going to be working double crochets into the back loop of every single stitch until we've reached the end of our ribbing. Now, since we're coming back in the direction of the main body, we're going to need to join this to the rest of the slip over. So in order to do that, at the end of our row, we're going to do exactly what we did before in our foundation row by skipping the next main body stitch, and then we're going to slip stitch into the following 3 stitches. So again, when we work on the next row, we're going to ignore those 3 slip stitches that we made, and then we're just going to do alternating regular double crochets and front post double crochets until we reach the end of the row. And we're just going to keep repeating the Eli rib stitch, joining as we go with each row until we've worked our way all the way around the main body of our slip over. Once you've worked the ribbing all the way around, you're going to need to join our current row with the first row that we made so that everything forms a nice, neat and tidy loop. To do this, you just need to align your most recent row, so your very last row of ribbing, with the first row that you created, your foundation chain. You're going to chain 1, and then working through both layers of fabric, making sure the stitches are aligned, you're just going to slip stitch through both layers of fabric. And you're going to do this for every single stitch of your ribbing until the waistband is a nice closed loop with no holes or gaps in it anymore. At which point we can just fasten off our work. And with that, all you need to do is weave in your ends and your Atticus Slipover is finished. Thank you so much for watching my very first YouTube video. I hope you give my Atticus Slipover pattern a try. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and consider subscribing if you want to see more content from me. I'll see you next time, and happy crocheting!